Welcome to another episode of the Arter Project. I'm your host, Nick Arter, and today, thrilled to be joined by another sister in the space, none other than Taylor Valera. Taylor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Taylor's another advocate in the space, advocating specifically for, largely for other women in the space and mothers in the space and other BIPOCs also who were interested in the psychedelics as well. So this should be a fun conversation. Taylor and I have a lot of similarities and things in common in terms of our journey. And, it should be a very interesting conversation.
I am excited to be here. And this is also the Tailored Healing Collective podcast. We're doing a collaborative episode today, and I'm here with Nick Arter. He is also a podcast founder who is working to create space for BIPOCs within the community who are new to the psychedelic space and interested in learning more. So excited to be here for this conversation today.
100%, 100%. So here we are. We're about a week out of Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind.
Oh, yes, the new rave right now.
I do think it's a good thing for psychedelics. We're seeing more and more mainstream adoption, right? So the one thing that I didn't like about the documentary series is for the work that we do, I didn't really see any people of color in the documentary at all. So we are seeing mainstream adoption, which is dope. And, we continuously support, everybody getting help. But I will say, I do think it's important we're having this conversation because, there was a lack of diversity in that series is a critique that I had. And, again, just all the more adds to our mission.
Yeah, I watched it. I finally finished it all the way through, and I was trying not to be too critical of it at the beginning. I wanted to give him a chance because I did hear about the book before when I was starting my own psychedelic research. And don't get me wrong, he gives a lot of great information. It's very informative for someone who's very new to the space, who wants to know more about it, but it's told from one specific perspective. Now, he did have the fourth episode about peyote, which I thought did a decent job of highlighting Native Americans, but that's not the only one. He had 3 other chances in episodes to talk about it. In that first episode, where he kind of skimmed over the war on drugs, it didn't rub me the right way. I was like, well, this wasn't a war on white hippies. This was essentially a war on Black and brown people, low income, pushing the opioid epidemic. It was a lot going on. And that was a big missed opportunity, I believe, for him. So, we have to kind of take that into our own hands now and retell these stories without leaving that part out.
100%. And the war on drugs, they left out, they mentioned MK Ultra, which MK Ultra, for listeners who aren't familiar, was experiments that were ran by the CIA in the United States, measuring the effects of LSD as a mind controlling agent. They mentioned that this was like a secret tests too that were later revealed. They mentioned MK Ultra, but they didn't mention that a majority of the participants in MK Ultra, unwilling participants, were people of color. I think that is often missed actually with MK Ultra. But I had that critique as well, particularly in that second episode on the war on drugs.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit about MK Ultra experiments. And again, he could have touched on that a little bit more. But again, I guess what can we really expect when you're not living out that experience? You're only going to speak from your own experiences.
100%.
So I'm not somebody who's going to get necessarily angry about it. It just gives me more drive to keep doing the work that we're doing right now, which is creating that space, making it a safe space for us to come and talk about it. Because, Black and brown people, we're not okay usually with just coming out about topics like this. We've been criminalized for so long. Like, who wants to come out and say something? We all feel like we got to be quiet about it. We can't come out and be as casual with it unless you're a celebrity, of course.
Unless you're Wiz, unless you made black and yellow.
I was excited, and I'll talk about that one real quick. I was excited to see it, but I'm 30, so I grew up in that time when it was Taylor Gang all day long. That's my name, Taylor, so I was associating myself with it all day. But when he came out and he was talking about running a business in Amsterdam called Mr. Caps, I'm like, so he's been talking about cannabis forever, and now mushrooms. So that's how the wave is starting. People are going to start making it more socially acceptable, and they're starting with the celebrities.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's such a slippery slope, right? Because like on one end, it's like you want like mass adoption or like public awareness. And like in America, we have a celebrity driven culture to where it's like, if a celebrity endorses it, that's the best way to spread the message. But at the same time, these medicines and these ancient practices and rituals need to be treated with respect, right? We don't want to turn them into like the app store. They should look like iTunes. It's a thing of respect. And it's just like an interesting conversation we're going to have as, like we saying, as mainstream adoption, as we see that, further and further along.
So I do want to ask, what first brought you into the psychedelic space? I know we were speaking a little bit before the show, but would you be able to tell listeners on my end what brought you into this space to begin with? Like, how'd you get into it?
100% Taylor. So actually always been into like drawn to like Eastern religions and Eastern traditions and spirituality. Always been very passionate and reading tons of spiritual books. But, that kind of, initially, actually, I was saying college, and it kind of was like in the back of my mind, like after college, because, you're off into the real world. Like I don't have as much time to sit and meditate as much anymore. But I always like there was like an underlying truth that I always, continued to seek out. I was aware of from reading, Seed of the Soul, Celestine Prophecy, Eckhart Tolle, a lot of different books. Got into corporate America, worked. I'm 31 now. COVID hit in 2020, so just 2 years ago. That was like a time for us to really like slow down and focus on what's important. And in that time, I caught up on a lot of reading, a lot of going back to like a lot of books that I was reading in college. And I'm going to sound like a hypocrite now, actually, because it was actually Michael Pollan's book. I know we started off hating on him. But yeah, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, I read during the pandemic, and it just completely opened my eyes because like it registered true in terms of like what I kind of like believe from like different Eastern religions and traditions and everything. But it had like a scientific backing, these things can be proven. So it's like kind of where the East and the West kind of like merge. So that like piqued my interest. I live in DC, psychedelics are decriminalized. And like, I just like ran like a Google search, like, go to a center and do psychedelics. They're decriminalized. So I couldn't actually go to a facility for mushrooms, but I did find ketamine. There was like a ketamine infusion place actually about, really close to my house actually. And I did ketamine and it really changed my life. Like I said, slowing down, because I always was like a workaholic and an entrepreneur, and ketamine kind of like just removed a lot of stress from my life, removed a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety and worry. I went to like a series of infusions, like 6 straight for about a week. And then after that, I repeated infusions on a monthly basis. And I still look at it like a regular tune-up. And from there, I looking more into the space. I didn't see many people of color in the space. And I just kind of wanted to add my voice to, the collection of knowledge. And I actually just got finished ayahuasca retreat just about a month ago, actually.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. We could talk about that a little bit, but that was pretty cool. That was like next level. Probably my most transformative psychedelic experience. I'm still processing a little bit, but it was pretty cool. Yeah. So I'm here now, and I just want to continue just spreading public awareness.
I think that's so important to spread that awareness, just because, the first time, and I'll say this because we are people of color in this space, the first time that I told someone of color, even a Black man, that I tried psychedelics, he told me I was smoking crack rocks.
Wow. Oh man,
that's the miseducation though, right there.
You gotta change that, Taylor.
Yeah. I got offended the first time he said that, and I haven't spoken to him in years, obviously. But going down the line, I looked back at it and said, "Wow, he's just really uneducated about what was going on." As upset as I want to be, there's so much uneducation in our community. But things like Percocets and lean, they're so regular that if I told you about something outside of that, you would probably think it just for white people.
Yeah, 100%. And rightfully so, because, the drug war propaganda machine and, so many people from our community, getting in trouble for drugs. So it's just like anything that's associated with drugs is just like, no. And for everybody in America, we've all were just like brainwashed by like DARE and stuff. Like in elementary school, like how are you gonna come inside like a classroom of kids and say like, yo, your mind's gonna look like a scrambled egg? Like it's just not realistic. America is just everything's fear.
That's funny. I was speaking with my brother not too long ago, and we were talking about how Dare, I saw an article, Dare was one of the biggest failures of the 90s, apparently.
Wow.
Just
Wow.
because, the way that they were teaching kids was putting more fear into them than actually education. And then at
Mm,
the same time, not only were they not learning anything, they were more likely to do drugs than to not do them at that time. So it's
fascinating.
like, what was the point of the program? Then what did we get out
Yeah.
of it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how a lot of things are, right? You try to fix it and it ends up just making the problem worse. So Taylor, so could you talk a little bit about your own introduction to psychedelics and the psychedelic space as well?
Sure. So mine was recreational my first time. I did not know what I was getting into at the time, but I was 19 years old, having a fun summer with friends, and I tried LSD for the first time. Now, I had heard about LSD before. I heard Steve Jobs had done it, but back then,
Mm,
Apple was not as big as it is now. But
yeah.
I didn't hear too many positive things about it. I did hear that he had a positive experience that helped him shape his company into what it was by using it, but I wasn't thinking that, but those 14 to 16 hours of LSD were so
Wow.
transformational in my life. I was never the same after. And it was a few years after. And, one misconception I think that people have is they think that psychedelics is something that you do every day, all the time, and it's addictive. And it's not. This experience was so pivotal and so huge in my life that it took me about 5 years before I tried it again because that experience sat with me for that
Wow.
long.
Wow.
So moving forward, I had a couple more experiences, but it wasn't until I was pregnant with my daughter, who I have here with me now, that I had decided to go on a mushroom journey. And I had gone through some depression during the beginning of my pregnancy. I did not want to be pregnant at all. And probably about, I want to say a few weeks into my third trimester, I took a trip to the beach and I decided to go on a mushroom journey for some reason. I just felt called to. And of course, I
Mm,
questioned myself, am I doing the right thing? I shouldn't do this because I'm pregnant. And something just told me, just try it. So I did. And that was the catalyst for creating my podcast. After that journey, I told myself, okay, you've gone through all of these things. This needs to be talked about. This is a natural medicine that has helped you not only reanalyze how your entire pregnancy has gone, but what work you're supposed to do in life after. This is part of your
mm.
calling and part of your purpose. And I knew I was going to get feedback and critiques. I had to drop my midwife who I had because she was
Wow.
judging me in the space, who was another Black woman. But again, there we go with
Wow.
the uneducation, not knowing about it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it's easy to judge what you don't know about. So I had my daughter, had a healthy birth. She came out, I had a natural birth within that same time. And after that, and starting the podcast, more and more people came into my life, and I decided that it was time to share with other people, not only just people who look like me, but others, that this is something that can be transformational and healing for so many people in their lives. Where, during this pandemic, I saw so many people get more addicted to their phones, more addicted to, painkillers and things like that, because they were trying to suppress all these things in their life. And what
Mm,
psychedelics has done for me is take away that repression. You can't hide away from it. Every
yeah.
fear you have, every pain, every memory that you think is forgotten about is going to come up, and it's going to
Yeah.
resurface, and you have to face that. It's not a
100%.
magic pill that's going to make everything go away. It's going to be a tool that helps you navigate through your next steps in life, whatever it is that you want to deal with. And you don't have to be addicted to it. It's not, like I said, it's not addictive. You go to it when you're ready. It's a medicine that comes from the earth. And though I do appreciate the scientific side because I'm a researcher, I love good article, I love information, I was more in tune with the spiritual side of it. And I decided that
Mm-hmm.
mothers, because they go through such a transformational time in carrying a new soul and a child, that they were the main ones who needed to know about it. So, that's how
Mm.
everything started, and it's been going ever since.
Yeah, that's fascinating. First off, that's a beautiful journey. There's so many questions I have like to unpack there. But like starting with what you said at the end about, the importance of mothers bringing in, new souls and new life, that kind of ties in like the work you do with, the healing with the use of the sound bowl. Can you talk a little bit about that more and like explain like the significance of that and how that's effective, especially like with an infant?
Sure. So I actually started sound healing with the birth of my first son, which was during the pandemic. I had him May 2020. So the pandemic had just started. I was in quarantine and I decided to get sound bowls. We all had stimulus check money. So I decided to use it. I had worked with sound bowls before, but none of my own. A friend of mine, her mother was a practitioner, and I started reading up on the importance of sound and how frequency and vibration affects our brain waves and how it can
Mm,
transform anything. So when I got this sound bowl, I started to play and noticed that I felt in different parts of my body being more relaxed, being more in tune. I'm an overthinker and have had chronic
interesting.
anxiety for as long as
Yeah.
I can remember. So when these bowls were being played, things started to kind of release and relax in my body that weren't normal. I'm used to like
Wow.
my jaw tightening up, my shoulders getting tight, just always on fight or flight mode. And I started to relax and I realized, wow, this can actually help. So after having my son, I started to play for him. And babies are naturally already open. Their pineal gland is wide
Hmm.
open at birth.
Hmm.
It's through foods we eat, what they consume on television that can decalcify that. So I noticed how much he was responding to it and decided, this is something that I kind of want to pursue because mothers experience so much anxiety, especially in the BIPOC community, whether it be from not being able to breastfeed, not being able to be home to provide for their children. There's so many factors in it. And I thought that it would be an awesome tool to use. So the sound healing kind of started to go hand in hand with the plant medicine and entheogenic work because when you use these tools, you become so in tune with your body and you stop resonating with just the physical properties. You start becoming in tune with the spiritual ones. And birth is a spiritual process. Like I said, you're
Hmm.
carrying a soul inside of your body. And sound is the first connection that you have with your child. They hear your heartbeat from inside, from the very beginning. So being in touch with that, that's the first sound is life. And like you, I also connected with Eastern medicine very early on, especially in my college years, and was interested in the connection that we make between mind and body. So then, it catapulted into me watching movies like Doctor Strange and things like that. Like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. This makes
Yeah.
sense. They're putting it
Yeah.
out there, just nobody's really paying attention. So
Hmm.
to gather that back up to bring with pregnancy and motherhood, putting those two together, these alternative forms of healing helped create this pathway in my life where I did not have to just be a mother. I could use tools that I healed myself with to help others who are going through such hard times and pain. And this pandemic has kept so many people closed minded, shut down, not really connecting with the world and not connecting with themselves. So it's all about, tuning in with your mind and your body to create a better relationship with self. And when you have that, I think the opportunity to transform is always there.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful. The sound in particular, I think so. I was watching some documentaries. It was called like The Sound of the Universe or something recently. So all of that makes just complete sense. And it was just talking about like the ideas that the universe may have been birthed from like
From
sound.
sound, yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, yeah. So that's when I was thinking about that and like what you do with the sound bowls, like it just makes perfect sense to me in my mind, and especially like sounds like universal. So like if a newborn may not know like language or be able to put together the words, but like the universal sound and the vibration might translate in some universal way. I don't know. It kind of makes sense to me. I think it's a real beautiful thing.
Yeah, and sound affects us all. I have a brother who is hard of hearing. He doesn't associate with the deaf community or the hard of hearing community, but because of that, sound affects everyone because it's vibration too. It's not just
Correct.
the music
Yep.
that you hear, you literally feel it in your body. And because we're made up of so many cells and nerves and receptors in our body, that's going to be the first thing it picks up. So no matter where you are, your body is always in tune with the energy that comes from sound, from frequency, whether it's outside hearing a car go by, footsteps, any of that, it's always going to affect your body in some kind of way.
100%. And with that, Taylor, when you're playing, would you say that the way that you play is more intuitive
For
or
me, yes, I will say that. I know people get
okay?
very technical when it
Yeah,
comes to
yeah.
that, but for me, it's always been intuitive. I was one of those gifted kids who I heard music. I don't even know if you've seen this
Oh,
movie,
wow.
August Rush. It's an old movie. It hasn't been out in a long time, but it was about a musical prodigy. And I was not a prodigy. However, I've always resonated with music just in the way I feel it and I hear it. I taught myself how to play piano when I was a child. With music,
Oh, that's
I'm a
incredible.
pitch learner. So I'm not someone who reads paper. I taught myself to read music, but I listen and I feel. I don't really go by laws and rules and things like that. And I guess that's just been the story of my life too.
Yeah. No, I could dig it. Art, can only be created from our feeling center. You can't really think your way there, right?
Right.
You can't think your way through art, because it has to resonate with others. So yeah, that makes total sense. Can you talk about the incorporating the two then? So we have, working with sound and vibration frequencies, and then also with psychedelics. Is there intersectionality there that you can discuss a little bit?
I would say, and I think touched on this earlier a little bit, but being in touch with your body, I think is something that everybody needs to work on all of the time because we are beings as of lately in this society. We're so used to having our phones in our hands all the time, having a screen in front of our face that we are very out of touch with body. And when you're out of touch with your body, it makes it very hard to connect with other people. It becomes hard to become aware of your own emotions. So connecting the two, I have had experiences where I have been on journeys and I have used my sound bowls during that time, and it sort of elevates the experience, if that makes sense. Playing it when you are on a journey, and I'm not sure if you know this or you can speak to this yourself on your own, ketamine or even other experiences that you've had, when you are using psychedelics or plant medicine, you're having an out of body experience most of the time. So you're separate from self, the self that you have, your physical self, and then you have your spiritual self. So when we bring sound into it, when I say it's elevating the experience, you start to feel everything. You're paying very close attention to everything in your body and the way you feel. So if I play a certain sound bowl, like one of them, I think is 432 hertz, another one is 528, you feel it in your
Mm.
body. It kind of allows space for opening because we can be very closed off. So when you allow it to open, those emotions can flow more freely. It's Kundalini. So
Mm.
it's going from your
Mm-hmm.
root all the way up to the top. And when those things are repressed, it becomes hard to navigate through different areas in life. So I like to implement the two together for people, not during a journey necessarily, but maybe before or sometimes after, because it kind of prepares you for all the other emotions that you're going to feel. It's already going to be open and heightened by the use because, it's altering your brain chemistry, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also the sound's going to alter your body chemistry as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes total sense. I've had similar experiences with the ayahuasca retreat I just returned from in particular. I went to Orlando, Florida. Soul Quest was the place where I went for my retreat. And they were playing ácaros. When indigenous folks use psychedelics in the Amazon, they created these songs called ácaros. And instead of the songs and the vibration and the frequency that they communicate, it communicates with it's so hard talking about psychedelics. I want to say like other beings or like otherworldly beings in these other dimensions. And when you're on ayahuasca experience, you can like communicate with these other beings, and the sound like comes through, and like it's just a shared experience in like a weird way where like the beings are communicating, or like the beings are moving in sync with the sounds from these ancient icaros, which is very fascinating. It's so crazy, Taylor. Like you struggle like explaining psychedelic experiences to your friends ever. Like
Yes,
who
which
don't do
is
psychedelics.
I have limited friends because of this. And even the ones I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
have, they don't understand. And it's not something you can like sit and explain to them
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's a feeling like, and there's
yeah.
so many emotions that come with it, which was going to lead me to asking you, can you tell us a little bit about your ayahuasca experience? Because I know that had to be huge for you.
100%. It was really transformative. As I was mentioned, just talking about like the beings, it was really different from my ketamine experience in the sense that I definitely felt like I was communicating with something like outside of myself and much larger than myself. And, completely just separate from me. And it had like all these answers and just like infinite intelligence. And it was, last like 6 or 7 hours. So I will say, it was a full weekend retreat. The first night, I wasn't all the way able to let go. And for, our experience in particular, being a Black man, it wasn't naturally comfortable being vulnerable around strangers, just a full tree, like 90 people. But the staff really, went above and beyond to really make everyone feel comfortable. So I didn't get the most out of the experience Friday because I still was struggling to let go all the way, but I was able to trust the second day after feeling the empathy and everything from the teams. And that second day, it I had the most transformative experience. I felt like I actually like relived like my birth, which was absolutely insane. Like, I had this experience where I was like shooting through these lights and, then I was like laying on my side and then like it just came to me. I was like, oh, I'm in the womb right now. And like in my head, like I was reliving my birth and like just like bursted through like all these different lights and stars. And since that moment, I just have been consumed with the overwhelming sense of gratitude of just like after being born, it was just like I just felt grateful to be alive, like all the good and the bad, just like this overwhelming deep sense of gratitude that I was picked to be a human being. Right. It sounds so crazy, but that was like the first thought that I had. And this was probably about a month ago. I had this experience, and that's feeling of deep gratitude from like being born again, kind of really lasted and stuck with me.
So, can I ask you, what is it like, or what does it feel like for you being a Black man in the psychedelic space? Because I speak very often with women, and I know our experiences can, even though they're similar, they vary from that of a man's experience. And it is not very often that I see Black men within this space, at least not publicly talking about it. And the ones that are very few. So, how does that feel for you?
It feels, first off, I feel honored. I feel honored that to have these beautiful experiences to be able to share. And from my perspective, I would probably say like as I mentioned, the toughest aspect of it, or initially shock was like difficult. Like truly, you have to really become vulnerable. You have to really surrender, and just the way our culture and society, how we're raised as men, especially Black men in this society, where we don't. It's difficult to really. You have to like let go and really trust. You have to trust. So that was probably like the biggest challenge I had on an individual level. Now, speaking about these experiences, man, like I said, I feel honored, and like because like I trust the psychedelic, like the medicine, as like such an authority, that it's just like I feel like honored that I could share this with others to help others, learn to grow and really like, you got to let go. We can't be tough all the time, right? We can't be tough all the time, and that's a thing for Black men, and rightfully so. But that's something I think we learn and are going to grow with in psychedelics, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And, though I will say using psychedelics, it will break down the ego, all
Yeah,
these ideas you've had about yourself, like you are a Black man, I'm a Black woman, I'm a
yeah,
mother, you're a worker, whatever these things are that will break it down. But I think it's still important to talk about why having BIPOC speak up more about this is so important right now. Of course, we can dissolve all ideas of who we think we are, but we still have to come
true.
back to live in this 3D reality world where these things are still very real. There's still people getting killed, criminalized, who are BIPOCs within this community. So it's like, how do we make that change and create that and then voice that over to people who don't look like us, so it doesn't look like it's a us against them kind of thing?
100%, 100%. And it's interesting. Another unique thing about our experience as well is as you mentioned, psychedelics tend to break down. You go through an ego dissolution process, and a lot of times, like the trauma that we have can be, it's a transgenerational trauma. So, like, we have to deal with hundreds of years, and it's impacting us one way or another. We're just not conscious of it or not. And I do think that's what is unique to our experience in this space. But yeah, overall, the more hearts we open up for empathy is just, productive in itself for each of us in the space.
It's awesome to hear. So where do you hope to see, your platform grow too, or would you like to, just continue being a voice within the space?
What I really want for the platform is to provide objective coverage and just really document. Like I said, it's dope. Like that, this is the psychedelic renaissance is something we get to experience and we get to see and get to live through. And I just want to like document it. I want to document it as much as possible. And also, there's so many. We talked about it earlier, but just the misinformation and miseducation. There's so many myths that need to be broken down. And I kind of just want to like communicate these ideas, these often complex ideas, in like ways for mass production or mass understanding, and for the entire public to just like gravitate towards it. Obviously, I'm not saying my platform is going to be the one to do that. I just want to just be a part of this movement and just enjoy watching it unfold. Now, as far as where I think psychedelics are going, I would say I think within 2 to 3 years we'll see MDMA legalization for therapy. I think we'll see psilocybin in about 4 years, 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about MDMA, and then psilocybin. I know it's already, I think it was approved earlier this year in Oregon for use there for psilocybin therapy. So, I mean, it's going to be awesome to see more facilitators come about. But like you said earlier, this is going to be, even though we're witnessing this renaissance right now, it's still going to have a certain turn to it, like most things do. And one way I used to describe it to someone before was, now imagine these sacred indigenous medicines are within one country or a few countries that are very private about their use. Someone comes in, hey, I want to experience this. I'd like to try it. Reluctantly, person lets them try it. They try it. They take it back to their own town, village, wherever, and say, hey, guys, come on, let's try this. So they try it and they say, oh, I want more of this. So they go into these communities that are not their own, cultural practices that are not their own, and kind of invade the space because they want to use it for their own benefit, their own use. And, that was the story ultimately of Maria Sabina that he kind of touched on, and how to change your mind. But we saw how her life ended. Her town blamed her for what was going on. So I won't say I fear, but I kind of see that happening right now with the way that it's resurfacing. You're going to have people who come in who are raving about it. It's going to help my mental health and make me more accept, or, help me accept death a little bit better. But then you're still leaving out these giant groups of people, who you took from in the first place, who have been in this country, still under mental slavery, that need to help come out of it, but you still benefit from keeping them in these places. So this medicine is not benefiting everyone at the same time. We don't want to keep replaying these same stories. Hence why it doesn't matter how small of a part you think you're playing, you speaking out and using your voice is so important right now. It creates a space for people who don't know that there's a space for them.
100%. And with that, Taylor, this just came to me as you were saying it also. Another aspect of kind of what I also want to do is talk about the business side of it as well, because we are going to need some type of equity in the space also. Because I do have background experience as an entrepreneur and stock trader and things like that. So I also try to educate about, what's going on in this industry, because we live in, like you mentioned earlier, physical reality. We live in this capitalistic world. And I do think there is a responsibility, to ensure that, those who are being compensated are, it's just justifiably earned, right? It's given to the right people. So that's something else I do hope to accomplish with the Art of Project is equity.
I hope to see that as well, because I fully expect it. I can already go in Whole Foods today and see mushroom powder, lion's mane tinctures and things like that being blasted on the shelves now. So it's about to become a thing, like where it's accessible. But again, like part of my mission is to make that accessible for everyone. But it's one thing I will say, it's difficult to create space where you still want to be part of a system that we're trying to break down right now. These systems put in place, they're no longer working for everyone. They were never working for anyone, but now people are coming to the realization that they aren't. So outside of I want to say clinical use. There are people, especially in decriminalized states, who are teaching to grow your own. And I know that's going to be
Mm.
something that's also going to try to be regulated by the US
Yeah, yeah,
government
yeah.
because, you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
put something out there like, not everybody can have it. That's too much. You can only have this much because it's going to make you go
Mm.
crazy,
And
you know.
it's nature.
But
You
that's
can't
how you
regulate
keep it
nature.
in certain communities to make sure
Yeah,
not
yeah,
everybody
yeah.
gets a piece of it, you know, that it only
Mm-hmm.
benefits certain people. So, you know, I'll see it, but hopefully, you know, with more people speaking out, we can start to create that equity.
100%. 100%. And then especially like when you've spoken a lot about more than I have this episode, but just like the history, the ancient traditions of like the iboga plant in Africa. I know you mentioned Maria Sabina's story. You know, if psychedelics do like, you know, cause like the revolution in mental health care that, you know, we think may happen in this country, Maria Sabina, it's largely responsible to her. She is like will be like the Steve Jobs of that, you know,
Yeah.
of that revolution, if you think about it, because she introduced mushrooms to Western society, and those everyone, you know, that type of respect needs to be given to the indigenous folks of this culture.
Definitely. And I hope in the future to continue to bring on more people of color and indigenous people who have that lineage who can speak to their own experiences, because a lot of people that I've spoken to, it's also been lost within their own cultures because they've been
Mm,
integrated into Western society. So they don't even benefit off of it like they should
mm-hmm.
because they've been brought here into America where it was criminalized. So even if they have ancestors who are practicing, they no longer practice. So everybody's starting to kind of come back to themselves right now.
Yeah, Taylor, let me ask you this question: how was it like? Isn't that's like the biggest like? It's hard to reconcile in your mind, right? When you have that first trip, you had your first LSD trip, and then like you realize like how tremendously like how cool that was, and that most people don't know about it, and the fact it's illegal. Like it almost makes you almost feel like a crazy person because it's like, yo, this is like this is the solution here, right? You know, or like
Yeah.
how could this be illegal?
I've felt crazy since that experience because I can't really talk to many people about it unless they're
Mm.
already within the space because I'm going to look like I'm smoking crack rocks. Uh, they'll be like, I'm sorry, what? But you know, one of it, even though she's very popular and trendy, one thing that made me feel so normal was when Janae Aiko put out her album Trip, and she talks about
Mm.
her experiences not only with LSD but also with mushrooms. And
Oh
I was like,
wow.
okay, so there is someone else of color and
Oh,
a
that's
woman.
dope.
So I don't
That's
have to
dope.
feel like I'm psycho. Yeah, she's a celebrity, but I know that I'm not crazy because I felt crazy for so long having these experiences where you see everything in life is connected and there's more than what society
Yeah.
has put in place. But it was such
Yeah.
a new time in my life. I was, you know, just starting college and things were different. And it's a very experimental time for everyone. But being that she had an album speaking about it, and then I started to find more artists that were kind of underground talking about it but still being public with it. It made it more comfortable. As this renaissance rises, I know there's going to be much more music that comes out because in the BIPOC community we are storytellers. We use music in order to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, share stories and share
Communicate. Yeah.
wisdom. So it will be a great thing to see. But yeah, I mean, it's the crazy people who know everything's going to happen first. And I knew this was going to happen at some point. It's the crazy people that have all the wisdom because they see things that others don't. So I guess I'm just one of them.
That's a bar right there. Yeah, I love that. That's a quote. I love that quote. Yeah. How was that? Could you remember like the like specifically what happened on the LSD trip? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Oh, it'll never leave my mind. I mean, I lost sense of time. I will say that I would look at the clock and think that 5 minutes had passed, or think an hour passed by. It was really 5 minutes. I saw all sorts of colors and lights. I was living in Illinois at the time where there are not a lot of city buildings or anything like that. It's mostly farmland, which means I got an awesome view of the sky. And when I say
Mm.
like my interpretations of things that I saw, they're there. Like I know that they're there. So the way that we interpret sky with the naked eye is not the same as when you're on psychedelics because it takes you into another realm where you have more access to seeing different worlds right outside of your own. And I believe it was a quote that Maria Sabina said, there's another world that exists right outside of our own that's invisible. Now, when you're on psychedelics or using mushrooms, it's very visible and you see that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
for me to know
yeah.
that that world was there, but then it left automatically once the trip was over, it was kind of hard. It's like, wow, was I crazy? Does that place really exist? And then like I remember towards the end, remembering that everything is connected, appreciating nature, just sitting outside and like, wow, I live here. Like I'm great. Like you had gratitude, like you were talking about in yours. I'm grateful to be alive and to sharing this experience. I feel like when depression kicks in everyday life, you forget the things to be grateful for. You forget that we're all here to experience. When you see war and drugs and everything that is harmful and low vibrational in people's lives, and then you think about what happens during a psychedelic trip, it's not that you're negating that none of this happens. You realize that everything happens together in sync. It has to happen for a reason. The light has to coincide with the dark. You have to have both. We can't ignore one and not have the other. We have to live in harmony with both. And when you can kind of hold on to that feeling, it becomes just a little bit easier to balance through these things.
That's the truth. That is the truth. And it's so, yeah, that's the truth. And that's the thing is once you have, I would say for me, like once you have this experience, you just know truth when you hear it and you can really like feel it like on a deep level. And yeah, I just felt that like there is a reality that is beyond our five senses. I'm not one of those people who believe like that the psychedelic experience is just like you're hallucinating or it's just some chemical reaction. I do think it does allow us to see something else that's going on that might not be visible all the time or accessible all the time. And DMT in particular, that was, DMT is the compound involved in like when ayahuasca.
I've experienced it.
Yeah. So DMT is so super odd as far as like the alternate reality is like, because like I said, it's like there's something else that's talking to you. There's something else that's talking to you, and it's so bizarre. I think they call it the DMT, the spirit molecule.
Yes, I've read a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. It's funny because my husband is a super duper fan of Rick and Morty, where they talk about that, I think, in like every episode.
Yeah.
But more from like a funny comedy point of view. But yes, I've experienced DMT and I've gotten messages during that time. DMT is not my favorite, I'll say, because it's a lot to experience in a very short amount of time. I haven't gotten to experience ayahuasca, but through DMT, I did get messages about both of my children. And this was before I was even pregnant with her. It was last summer, actually. And I heard that your children will have the gift of seeing and the gift of knowing. And I'm like, okay, did I say that or did somebody else say that? But it always stuck with me. I'm like, you can't make these things up. There are other entities that exist outside of our world. It's just very hard to accept when we live in a world where we're scrolling on our phones and living in a virtual reality world versus the one that we're here. Like when you're in touch with nature, that's a whole world too. There are all these realms within each other. Hence why I get into movies like Doctor Strange thinking a little too hard about these things because they're putting it out there. They're telling you that there are realities that exist with one another, but people usually miss that point. They're just looking into, oh, it's just a cool Marvel movie with superheroes. No, they're telling you these worlds exist with one another. I even found spiritual reverence in, was it the Avengers, with Thanos and the Infinity Stones, because each of those stones that he had represented a different aspect of life and he wanted control of all of them. And, when you're thinking a little too hard or, very deep into a psychedelic trip, you realize everything that's going on in society, in the world, and kind of the thirst for control and power. And that's where the freedom part comes in. When you're able to make your own decisions and create that own freedom within your mind, you don't become so entrapped to your own emotions and the negative feedback and vibrations that are put out into the world.
I felt
Sorry,
that one also.
I get too deep sometimes.
No, that's amazing. I almost feel like this is like a part of my integration session. Like my ayahuasca trip wasn't too long ago, and all those things are ringing really, really true to me. But yeah, there's so much. There's so much. You mentioned ayahuasca, which you haven't tried before. For me, I haven't tried LSD before, but I am a big. I read Steve Jobs' autobiography when I was younger also was inspired by it. So I was always also curious about that. From what I understand is that LSD is more of like a external experience as opposed to internal. Like you're not like closing your eyes and seeing colors, like you're seeing like distortions and the things around you, or that's like the focus. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do believe it's a little bit more physical. I think it sits with you internally after, but I had more outwardly body experiences rather than inward. It was less emotional and more like things changing around me. And I would not suggest ever looking in a mirror while you're on, because that's one part I do
Yeah,
remember. I
everyone
looked in the
said
mirror, saw my pupils, and was freaked out.
that. Yeah, that people say that often. I think that was in Pollen's doc. Pollen's doc also was like he looked in the mirror and like he saw like a skull or something like that.
Yeah, I did see that part.
Yeah, there was something like that. But yeah, I was always curious about LSD. Like I said, I know Jobs like says that was a part of, giving him the inspiration for to build Apple or to start Apple. So I always thought that was pretty cool. Taylor, what do you think? We mentioned earlier about psychedelic or about celebrities in the space. What do you think about Mike Tyson's involvement in the psychedelic space?
I've heard a few interviews with him, one on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I watch just because I'm interested. I think it's interesting to hear his take on it just because of the figure he was looked at least when I was a kid. He was just always thought to be like this rough and intense person. I mean, he's a fighter. So, you automatically make your assumptions about him, but to kind of hear like how it changed him in his life, I felt like that was really interesting to see someone come out in that space and hear about how peaceful it made him and how much it made him change his mind in the way that he once thought. And if anyone needs a role model, I mean, look to the people like that in your life, the people who you see in one way growing up and you see them completely transform as you get older, because you see it's not just the medicine that's working through him. He's gotten older and he's had to, I assume, experience a lot in his own life. So that's caused him to analyze, take a look back at the person he thought that he was and kind of break down that ego. So I think it's awesome for him.
Yeah, it's real cool because, like you said, such the figure that he was, like to see that transformation, like it's almost like a live case study that we all get to see. And it's definitely bringing a lot more attention to the psychedelic space. We're getting it constantly. Another celebrity like each week or so. But Tyson, I would say right now is probably like, at least from things I've seen on YouTube, he's probably like one of the largest voices in the space right now. Black voices in the space right now, I would say, most popular.
Agreed.
In pop culture, not in
yeah.
yeah, obviously not in academia.
Definitely in pop culture. I would say outside of pop culture, one of the more famous pioneers that have been within the psychedelic space has been Kalindi E, and he has some awesome talks. He passed away in 2020, and I got the privilege to interview someone within his circle. And he is a very well-known psychonaut who speaks about macrodosing, taking very large doses to experience different universes. He speaks about the history of martial arts. He was a martial artist and speaks about how some of the first martial artists learned from ingesting, fungi and medicines to help them have these experience, not just these experiences, but these skills. We think about levitating, things like that. We think of those things as impossible. When you can access those parts of your brains, I would not be surprised if they were using fungi, because we only use certain percent of our brains as humans. So if you have more access to that, that's what mushrooms do for you. They are brilliant in the way that they are formed, in the way that they grow. And I wish I had that kind of access, hopefully one day.
What was his name again?
Kalindi E.
Kalindi. I'm gonna look him up. Actually, I haven't heard of him before. It makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah, martial arts is you're talking about bending like time and space and bending the physical to your own personal will. So yeah, it would be a natural connection that psychedelics may been involved in that. So I'm definitely gonna look into that more.
Awesome. So one of the last questions I had for you today. So in all the work that you've done so far, what do you think has been your favorite part about learning about psychedelics throughout the space?
My favorite part is the people I meet in the space. The people I meet in the space, like including like this conversation that we're having here today. Like when you go through your life just as a working adult and like getting up, going to work and come home, you don't encounter people who are into this stuff. And the folks who are into this stuff, it's like their souls like radiate like a particular, like an energy that you can kind of like feel. And so everyone I've met in the space, they're just so bright and they're just so empathetic and compassionate. And I've just met like some of the greatest people that I've met in my entire life, like in psychedelic space, I'd say. So the people. What would you say? What would you say for you has been the most meaningful experience in this space?
I would say the same because I grew up feeling so alone, especially after my first LSD trip. I felt even more alone in the world because I felt like I was tapped into all this universal knowledge, but most people
Yeah,
are not tapped into that.
that
And
would that
because of that, it makes me feel so alone and so crazy.
lonely.
So,
Yeah.
getting to meet more people within this space, especially in times where I mean, before I had my children, I used to be a photographer. So I would travel all over, take pictures everywhere. And now, since the pandemic, I've spent so much time alone in the house with my children. I don't get to connect with people as much anymore. And especially if I start talking about psychedelics, I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, you've obviously been alone for too long. But connecting with people in this space, doing the work that I've already done as a sound bath practitioner, it helps me realize that I can be a tool to help people not feel so alone in the world. And in turn, I've gotten the same thing back. So, I love connecting with people as well.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, and that's definitely how I feel like after this conversation. It's very, you feel the energy. The energy is contagious. And also have like a lot of things that I also want to like look into now. Like I want to research the sound bowl healings more. Research a few of the names you're giving me. So it's just the people that in the space really make this space, I'd say. But okay, Taylor, this is another episode of the Arter Project. I really appreciate you doing the episode with me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Can you tell my listeners how to find you too?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, the Arter Project. Arter is spelled ARTER Project. Then my website and blog to where I keep my viewers up to date on psychedelic news, coverage, and insights at arterproject.com. And Taylor, could you just provide your social media handles as well?
Sure. You can find me at Sound Bowl Mom or just Sound Bowl Mom on Instagram. And then my podcast page is Tailored Healing Collective. So either of those, you can always reach out with any questions that you have. I love to meet new people and talk about them. And also, if you have any experiences you'd like to share as well, please come into this space. The more voices we have, the better.
Awesome. All right. That does it for another week of the Arter Project. Nick Arter signing off. Peace.